Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, January the 24th, 2025. Barack Obama has been in the news quite a lot recently. There was the fact that he went to Jimmy Carter's funeral and his wife Michelle wasn't with him. Also, Michelle was absent when he went to Donald Trump's inauguration. So there's been a lot of talk about Barack Obama's marriage, and I thought that would be a good opportunity to look at Barack Obama's chart and look at Michelle Obama's chart. With Michelle Obama, we don't have a time of birth, so it is not a particularly satisfactory exercise. I also wanted to consider, in general, what is happening in his chart, because as I've suggested quite recently, I just don't think he's going away. And I think that he is always going to be there working behind the scenes. So, yeah, that is one thing I do want to look at. Unfortunately, there was a stabbing in Bavaria in the town of Aschaffenburg on Wednesday, in which, last time I looked, a 2-year-old boy was killed in the stabbing, and a passerby who tried to help was killed, and the perpetrator allegedly, or I think was, a 20-year-old Afghani who was having mental health problems. But there have been quite a lot of stabbings in Europe. We just had a Southport stabbing over the summer in the UK, and we do have a time. According to the BBC, it was at 11:45, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to look at the chart of the stabbing and to look at the previous full moon. But before I look at that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, January the 24th, 2025. And here is the chart, as always, set for noon, New York, and we can see that the moon is finally in Sagittarius. The moon seems to have been moving through Scorpio for sort of quite a long time. I mean, obviously, it hasn't been moving through Scorpio for a long time. It's just my imagination or my perception. But at noon, New York time, the moon is at 6 degrees Sagittarius, and that's kind of nice, isn't it? We've had a period of time without any planets in fire signs, and so it's just felt, a little bit boring, uninspiring maybe. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, perhaps some of the action is coming back. And the moon works relatively well in the sign of Sagittarius. It's not exalted in Sagittarius, or obviously Sagittarius isn't ruled by the moon, but still it tends to work relatively well, moon in Sagittarius, and it's a nice, open, honest placement. Very different from moon in Scorpio. Moon in Scorpio tends to keep its thoughts and feelings to itself, whereas moon in Sagittarius is famous for being open, honest, upfront, perhaps a little bit tactless. But moon in Sagittarius never means any harm. It's done with the best of intentions, and any offence that's caused by moon in Sagittarius, well, that's just unfortunate, and it's up to you whether you get offended, isn't it? I mean, I think that would be moon in Sagittarius's view. And the moon, when it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and it makes a sextile to the Sun. And really, those are the main aspects, indeed the only aspects taking place today. I mean, at least from a Greenwich Mean Time perspective, I have an ephemeris for the set for Greenwich Mean Time, and it tells you what aspects are exact on a particular day. I mean, there are a few semi-squares involving the moon, but that's really it. And aside from that, I suppose we should consider what time the moon moves into Sagittarius. The moon moves into Sagittarius at 4:29 a.m. London time. So if you're in Europe and the Americas, it really is a moon in Sagittarius day. It will, okay. If you're up really early, the moon in London or in Europe, the moon might be in, or Africa, the moon might be in very late Scorpio. But you can regard the moon as being in Sagittarius sort of all day long. Now, if you're in Australia, it's a slightly different picture. So here is the picture. Here is the chart set for Sydney at noon, and there you can see at midday the moon is at 28:14 Scorpio. So that means until this afternoon, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will be in late Scorpio, and possibly the main aspects will be moon opposition Uranus, moon trine Neptune. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, I would think that today possibly maybe a little more difficult than if you're in Europe or America. Less satisfying, I think. I mean, there'll be things happening which get your attention, but it might be a little bit of an irritation. And if you're looking for new starts, then leave it until late in the day when the moon moves into Sagittarius. And really, that's all there is to be said, at least in terms of what I notice. And then there is the heliocentric picture, and it is important to look at the heliocentric picture, especially when you've got a day which doesn't have that many geocentric aspects. And Venus is at 29 Gemini heliocentrically, and it's moving to a square of Neptune. So you've got Venus square Neptune, and with Venus square Neptune, there is a little bit of deception flying around, and it's possible that we reach the wrong conclusions, or we get the wrong ideas, or I suppose we might believe what people say. So it's very important with Venus square Neptune not to take what people say at face value. Always consider the possibility that something is happening behind the surface, and don't get caught up in fantasies. You might believe that something is possible, you might believe that someone is going to do something, but they don't do it. And so with Venus square Neptune, there's always a possibility of a bit of disappointment, but it is a heliocentric chart, so that disappointment may actually take place on a more collective level. It's not necessarily the case that you are going to feel personally disappointed by another person's behavior. It's rather that what people do just may not reach expectations. And another aspect we've got is a semi-sextile between Mercury and Pluto. So Mercury, heliocentric chart, Mercury's a fast-moving planet, and so this semi-sextile is not going to be around for very long. But with Mercury semi-sextile Pluto, there may be a feeling that something is being held back. We'd like to know something, and we get this feeling that someone's not telling us everything they know. And it may not be people, it may be governments, it may be organizations. Someone is using control of information to get some kind of advantage. And this means with Mercury semi-sextile Pluto that we must be very diligent in terms of seeking out the truth, and we should not be satisfied with what people say, with what kind of explanations people have. Now, I'm not advocating that we fall for conspiracy theories, but it's possible that under the surface things are happening which we need to know about. And another aspect we've got, let's turn my phone off, is Mars opposition Pluto. So this Mars opposition Pluto is not exact today, but it's starting to move into position. And so Mars opposition Pluto can actually be quite devious, I suppose, but it can also be quite power orientated, and questions of power are really becoming quite strong. And you actually could see the Mars Pluto opposition has kind of been connected to the Mercury. So what's happened is Mercury has just made a quincunx to Mars, and now it's making a semi-sextile to Pluto. So you might want to see Mars, Pluto, Mercury as part of the same thing, and that does mean it is a time when we're aware of power, how people are using power, how people are trying to hide things from us. They don't want us to know the truth, and it is all about control. With Mars opposition Pluto, and the reason I'm talking about people in general, talking about the collective, because again it is a heliocentric chart, and the heliocentric charts are not personal. They are more about the collective. Though I should probably have a video looking at people's natal charts from a heliocentric perspective, seeing if we can make any sense of them. So that's the heliocentric picture. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, January the 24th, 2025. Aries. Aries, things are getting better. You feel that you can get back into your stride, and the reason for that is obvious. The moon is moving into Sagittarius, and moon in Scorpio, if you're an Aries, is not always great, because you're having to do things in a more subtle way, and you're having to focus on emotional complexities, and that's just not something you really want to do. And with the moon in Sagittarius, you kind of get your spark back, and you can start to enjoying life more, and you feel you've got more power. And the moon is making a sextile to Pluto, and this reminds you, Aries, of all the things that are actually possible. Okay, you might not be able to do them right now, but you just know that you've actually got the power to make them happen. And so don't underestimate yourself. Will you ever underestimate yourself? You certainly shouldn't. And you just remember, moon is no longer in Scorpio. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia for the first part of the day, the moon might be in Scorpio, and a day might have a slow start, and it might not be until well into the afternoon that things really get going. But they will get going in the end. Well into the afternoon, I suppose it could be this evening if you're in New Zealand, actually. Is that right? Late afternoon, I think, off the top of my head. So if you're in New Zealand, for example, it might take a very long time to get into your stride, but by the late afternoon, things should be starting to move. So Aries, that is overall pretty fortunate, and I also think that you can start to enjoy other people's company. And perhaps recently you felt that other people, just weren't on particularly good form. They weren't very, very, very supportive, and they weren't really interested in who you actually are, deep down. But moon sextile the sun means you just get so much more from other people. They are going to be a lot more present and a lot more fun to be with. And with that moon in Sagittarius sextile sun in Aquarius, other people will perhaps present you with a certain foil. They'll give you ideas. You've got the energy and the action, but you sometimes need ideas from other people, or you want to do something and you get some feedback. And dynamism really is important. On your own, it's difficult to be completely dynamic. You need some feedback, and I think that really helps. And continuing on the theme of other people, there is a certain sense of excitement. You have probably felt this excitement over the last sort of couple of days, but it didn't seem to be going anywhere. There just wasn't the opportunity. But now there's actually a possibility that you can be surprised by other people's behavior. Surprised, in the fortunate sense of the word. Surprised to the upside. Things happen that you weren't expecting. And so, do give other people a chance. And new people might come into your life. Old people might show a new side to their personality. So overall, that does provide energy, excitement, action. And you don't have to be satisfied, with what is in front of you, because there's always something new. And today you can start experiencing whatever it is that's out there. And don't be complacent. I mean, not that you ever are complacent, but don't assume that it's going to be like this forever. The moon is in Sagittarius for a couple of days, and at the moment there aren't any other planets in fire signs. It's going to be a little bit of time before Venus moves into Aries. So, Venus is now at sort of 21 Pisces. Venus will move into Aries. If you're interested, Venus moves into Aries on February the 4th. So that's actually coming up quite soon. So 10 days' time. That's happening. And, you're going to have to wait a lot longer for the sun to move into Aries. So, make the most of the moon in Sagittarius, and don't be satisfied with what is in front of you. Now, one word about the heliocentric chart. In the heliocentric chart, Mars is slowly moving towards an opposition of Pluto, and Mercury has just made a quincunx to Mars. Is that right? Yeah. And remember, Mars heliocentrically doesn't go retrograde. There's no retrograde planets in a heliocentric chart. So Mars slowly moving towards an opposition to Pluto. And over the next few days, you might feel a certain sense of conflict. It's not necessarily a conflict that you have to get involved with. It may be nothing personal, but you can see around you that there are forces gathering strength which are opposed to one another, and there's a struggle developing. And it may just be that you're very sensitive to what's happening in the world around you, but it may be more connected with your community. But you're aware of this struggle, and the fact that some people feel hard done by, other people are trying to be in control. And what do you do about it? Do you just watch, or do you just somehow get involved? And that Mars-Pluto opposition may be asking you to consider the question of whether you want to get involved. And once you do get involved, that could be quite a drama. So you've got a bit of a choice, and with heliocentric aspects there is usually some choice, but I think this Mars-Pluto opposition heliocentrically is not something that you can entirely avoid. Taurus, you are aware that things are taking shape. They've taken some time. They've taken some time. To begin with, not much was going on, but you're starting to see something happening. And sort of the action first takes place at an unconscious level, and your feelings are strong, and your imagination is vivid, and because you realize that something is happening, you have a certain wariness there. Because, when things are happening, there's always the possibility that you might get over involved. It's nice to be involved, but sometimes, you can be involved too much. And that might mean, Sagittarius, that you are of the view that perhaps you should just not get involved at all, because you don't necessarily want to take the risk. I mean, there is always a risk with involvement, and you can see things taking shape around you. And also, you're slightly aware of consequences, perhaps consequences that other people don't see. And one aspect we've got is we've got the moon in Sagittarius moving towards an opposition with Jupiter. Now, this moon-Jupiter opposition is not exact today. It might be exact at the end of the day or into tomorrow. But this moon-Jupiter opposition is about something excessive, something being taken too far, and perhaps something that has a financial consequence. And maybe no one else sees the financial consequence, but you can see it very clearly, and you're starting to see it clearly, and you just get a vision of how something could turn out financially. And so if you have a vision or a fear perhaps about the financial consequences of a particular action that you might not be involved with directly, then take appropriate steps. And there is no harm in looking after your own best interests. Now, that's a little bit negative, but it's not all negative, because the moon in Sagittarius is making a sextile to Pluto, and it's also making a sextile to the sun. And the moon, the sun-moon sextile is, in your case, I would have said, fairly powerful. It allows you to project yourself and to project your ideas, and also to project your fears. So, I talked about money, and you might have an inkling that something might be more expensive than it appears on the surface. And if you share your intuition with other people, I think in the end they'll appreciate it. And if you're very clear about how something should be done, and also what should be avoided, I do think that people will listen to you. And being a Taurus, you sometimes like to hold back. You have an idea, something's important to you, but you just don't have the flexibility and the movement to actually go with it. And then there can be a lot of regrets, and you get very upset about things, about the way things showed up, or you might blame someone. That can be a Taurian thing. And fundamentally, what you're upset about is not taking the initiative when you had the chance. And I think there is a chance to take the initiative, to tell people how you feel, and to tell people about what you believe is right. And as I've already suggested, I think your intuition at the moment is actually on very good form. You just notice things that just other people can't see. And so if you're in any position of responsibility, or you're answerable, or indeed if you've been tasked with something, and you have questions about it, then go with those questions. Don't just do what you're told, whatever the situation. You might, I suppose, say, well, you've been told to do something, you're just going to do it, straightforward. Don't make a fuss, don't cause trouble. And then something might go wrong. Something might go wrong, but you knew it was going to go wrong all the time. And so by being open and honest about what you feel about a situation, you'll in the end be doing the right thing. And I think in most cases it will be appreciated. But it's not just about things going wrong. It's also about opportunities. You might see opportunities that other people can't. And you're afraid to talk about it because you don't know what the response is going to be. You might regard the whole thing as being pointless. But if you trust your judgment today, Libra, then I don't think that you're going to be sorry. And as far as relationships are concerned, the heliocentric chart suggests maybe a certain amount of caution because Venus is making a square to Neptune. And with that Venus square Neptune, it is important that you don't rush into things and that you don't take things at face value in terms of what people do, how they present themselves, the kind of impression they're going to give. You've got to always ask questions. And if someone is nice to you, for example, don't just bask in that niceness. Consider, why are they being nice? Because there is a danger of deception, and you just need to be aware of that. And you can be aware of that deception. And you can be aware of deception, not just by people, but by organizations, deception going on in society. Politicians are quite capable of being deceptive. You can see through it all if you want to. And once you see through it all, Moon makes a sextile to Pluto. Moon sextile Pluto geocentrically can allow you to turn things around very much in your favor, because once you understand the deception, once you see through the garbage, once you get to the truth, you actually have a great deal of power, and that is a power that you can definitely use. And just don't let anyone try to shut you up. They might try. Mercury is still making an opposition to Pluto. Sorry, Mars. Mercury is still making a geocentric opposition to Mars. And so that could be another person trying to talk over you. And talking over you to the extent whereby you don't think, and you think it's better to keep quiet. But if you understand what's going on and you understand another person's motivations, I'm confident that you'll be able to handle the situation. Gemini, relationships, it could be a theme for today as the moon moves into Sagittarius. So the moon in Sagittarius, Sagittarius represents the other, and a lot of your focus might be in terms of what people are doing. You might want to know what people are doing. You might be curious. And I think that you will be unwilling to completely take the initiative. I don't think that's really something you want to do. I mean, you could try, but on your own, you just might feel that you just don't have enough support, and you should see what other people are thinking and planning. And so perhaps at the beginning of the day, as you get used to what's happening, just ask a few questions, and just to make sure that you and everyone else are on the same wavelength, because there might be some scope for being surprised, and could be in a good way, could be in a bad way. The moon is making an opposition to Jupiter. I mean, it doesn't make that opposition to Jupiter until tomorrow. But it is an opposition. It is across the main axis of your chart. And I'm just thinking with that moon opposition Jupiter that some of your ideas and plans and what you were thinking about in terms of the future might be challenged. And the challenge, it could be useful. You get you are given new ideas, but at the same time you might see ideas and plans which just don't fit in with what you were planning, and you have to work it out. It's not necessarily the case that other people are right. They might be able to argue their case, in a way that is exciting, that's interesting, and might make you have second thoughts about what you were planning, about your vision of the future. But it may just be words, or it just may be a distraction. And so do hold fast to what you believe in. I think that is actually really important. And Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter's position is slowly starting to strengthen. Jupiter is going to go direct very soon. I think it's on February the 4th, that Jupiter goes direct. So you just got less than a fortnight before that happens, and then I think you're going to be a lot clearer about what you want. And what you don't want is another person to take advantage of your confusion, because when you're confused, when you're not quite sure what you want to do, you could do this, you could do that. You're vulnerable to following other people's suggestions, and these suggestions might not be always very useful. Yet the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and it's making a sextile to Pluto. And so with those two aspects, it does appear that people can be a force for good in your life. If you have a certain skepticism, you mustn't be totally believing. That really does matter. So have a certain skepticism, but also be open-minded, and do see what people are suggesting, and always listen to people's ideas and people's views, even if it is completely different from what you believe in, because somewhere along the way you might learn something, or recognize that you have maybe just not got something wrong, but have treated something in a rather trivial way. And in fact, it needs to be seen in a more expansive manner, and you need to sort of look at all the possibilities and realize that something that seemed trivial, that seemed to be of no importance, could actually be of really crucial importance. And some of your ideas may be a bit long in the tooth, and you need to be changed. And certain other people, not just people in general, but some people are in a position to really give you a different view, which is also expansive, and it affirms who you are. So always consider the impact that other people can have, and in many cases it can be a fortunate impact. Now, going to I haven't actually talked about the heliocentric chart yet, but there is one aspect in the heliocentric chart that I should mention, and that is the aspect between Mercury and Pluto. I never know quite how people listen to these videos. Some people might just look at the Gemini chapter and just not look at anything else. So if you're one of those people, earlier in the video I looked at the heliocentric chart, which looks at things from a perspective of the sun, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And in this heliocentric chart there is a semi-sextile between Mercury and Pluto, and I do think that could have an influence on you. And some Geminis may just realize that there is something else going on. Realize might actually be too strong a word. It might be this inkling that something is going on that is substantial, that needs to be taken seriously. But you can't quite get a handle on it. You know it's important, but you're not getting any help. You're not getting any clues, or not many clues. And it may be, Gemini, that you actually have to ask some questions, and you have to use your eyes, observe what's happening, and perhaps come up with a hypothesis about what could be happening, and then test that hypothesis and keep testing that hypothesis, and come up with new hypotheses, because something's not clear and it needs to be made clear. And once you see what's happening, then that's going to put you in a very powerful position. But while you don't know what's going on, what do? It's very difficult to know where to focus your energies. So that could be a challenge. I think it's not necessarily a compulsory challenge, but if you are up to this challenge, I think that it would be making your life much richer, and also you'd be taking as much power for yourself as possible, because power can be something rather zero-sum. If you don't have the power, then someone else has it, and you want to have as much power as possible. So do consider what is under the surface and try to find out. And once you do find out, if you can be bothered, you'll be making things much better for yourself, I think. Cancer, in some respects, things are slowing down a bit. You've perhaps had your fun, you've done what you need to do, and now you need a little bit of reflection. And reflection might involve just quietly thinking about what is happening. It might also be about sorting things out. There have been a lot of ideas recently. A lot of questions have been formed, and sometimes you just have to sit down and just work it all out, and work out what you need and what is actually completely irrelevant. And making that distinction could be very important. And you also need to bear in mind that you haven't got all the energy in the world. You can't be everywhere. You can't be in a state of constant motion. And it might be a day, and not just today, but to tomorrow as well. It might be a time when you need to be paying some attention to your health and well-being, and for example, making sure you get enough sleep, that you're relaxed, that you're not too tense. And it might actually be a transformative process. The moon is making a sextile to Pluto, and it's a sextile, nice aspect. Moon sextile Pluto is about a transformation, but it's a transformation that's not taking place in the public eye. It's just retreating, and as you reconsider things and consider things, you change, and you at least you change your perhaps your surface appearance. You change some of your attitudes, and you recharge your batteries. And then the moon doesn't just make a sextile to Pluto; it makes a sextile to the sun. And moon sextile sun is a great aspect. It's a very healthy aspect, because the sun and the moon are making a fortunate connection. And the sun and the moon, the male, the female, the yin and the yang, they're all in balance. And as a Cancerian, that is something you feel. And this moon sextile, the sun, is really the last positive point on the lunar cycle. So we have a new moon. I think it's on the 29th, and so this is the waning moon, and the waning moon is, all things being equal, less fortunate than the waxing moon. It's a time of endings rather than beginnings. It's the dark part of the cycle, and there can be sometimes a sense of decay and decline with the waning moon, but with the moon sextile sun, that final fortunate aspect before the new moon, for you Cancer, it can just be a time when you have a last chance to collect things together, and take things from a recent past, and work out how they can help you, how they can be good for you, and you just feel comfortable and confident, and you're ready for the next stage. And with the new moon on July the 29th, I'm pretty sure it's January the 29th, with that new moon, that is a new beginning. Of course, January the 29th is the beginning of the Chinese New Year. I think the Chinese New Year always starts with the first new moon in the sign of Aquarius. I think that's a good rule of thumb for when the Chinese New Year starts. So make the most of that moon sextile sun, and that moon sextile sun also allows you to understand things, and if something is being hidden from you, you can really get to grips with it, but you can get to grips with it in your own way. You don't need anyone's help. And once you understand what's happening, it will, I think, be very life-affirming. So today, Cancer, and I think tomorrow, should be a time where you are quiet, where you look after yourself, you bring things together, you look at this whole lunar cycle, and you actually that started at the end of December, and you decide what you want to keep, and you decide what you want to throw away. What you don't need is just clutter, things which are just cluttering things up. So that means that Cancer, it's a time when you can slowly start clearing the decks. Especially if the Chinese calendar is important to you, remembering that we've only got 5 days before the Chinese New Year, and so it's certainly not a time for doing anything new, I don't think. Leo, the moon makes a sextile to the sun, and moon sextile sun is a fortunate aspect. In a way, it's one of the best aspects. The sun and the moon are the most important bodies in astrology. They are the lights, and when they're in sextile, they are in a good relationship to one another. They support each other, and it's a relationship that is fundamentally healthy. And you, with the sun being your ruler, you really benefit from this sun sextile moon. And it's not necessarily the exact moment when the sun and the moon are in sextile. It's just having the sun in Aquarius, moon in Sagittarius, the two signs apart. There's just a good relationship between the two signs, Aquarius and Sagittarius. So it's a time, Leo, when you can feel sort of healthy and supported, and that things actually are working, and to an extent you're able to trust other people. I mean, it's never the case that everyone can be trusted, but there are enough people out there who can be trusted to ensure that you can have a good and a safe day. And so, avail yourself of social opportunities, and see who is around, see who you can talk to, see who you can get support from. Remember, the sun is in Aquarius, the sun is in your opposite sign, and the moon is making that sextile to the sun. And Leo, the fact that the moon is in Sagittarius is also important, because Leo is a fire sign, and you like having a bit of fire around. And so with the moon in Sagittarius, you're just feeling that there's more action. You're feeling more alive, and part of feeling alive is about doing something that is enjoyable and satisfying. And moon and Sagittarius sextile with sun might indicate that you and another person can do something that is enjoyable, that is not just empty pleasure, though. It's something really deep and meaningful. And this moon sextile sun can, in certain cases, be good for relationships. I mean, the moon in Sagittarius in the Leo chart, when the moon is in Sagittarius, it's often said that the fifth house, the Sagittarius covers the fifth house, it is about romance and close relationships. But it's not like the opposite sign, the seventh house. The fifth house is about having fun with another person. Okay, that may be romance, I suppose. I mean, I have to say that because some people, when they consult astrologers, they want to know about their love life and romance. So I have to say that if that's your concern, then moon sextile sun is a great aspect. But romance aside, you and another person can enjoy each other's company, and also respect each other's company. It is about doing something that you want to do. It's not necessarily about following the crowd. I mean, you have to accept other people's limits. I mean, the sun is in Aquarius. It is in your opposite sign, so that, to an extent, is about trying to understand other people's points of view, but not to the extent by which you lose touch of who you are and your own agenda. You have an agenda. You don't have to be very obsessed with this agenda, but there are some things you would like to do, and you want to do them by a particular date, by a particular time. In which case, you can get on with it. You can do it, and you can feel happy doing it. So that certainly looks good. But Leo, one thing about Leo's, it is a fixed sign, and there may be a certain tendency, Leo, to just take things at face value. I mean, all of the fixed signs can run that risk of taking things at face value and deceiving themselves. I think that can be an issue that Taurians have. Aquarians and Scorpios maybe not so much, but probably Taurians and Leos may be more vulnerable than the other two fixed signs. But right now, there's just a little bit of a danger of deception, of fooling yourself, believing that you've found an answer when you haven't found the answer at all. And so it's always good to be positive and optimistic, no doubt about that. But you can take things too far. You can drift off on a cloud of fantasy. You can convince yourself that something is possible when in fact it's not at all possible in its current form. And that's maybe the challenge. It's not about taking something and telling yourself it's a fantasy and abandoning it. It's about taking something which in its current form is fantastic and is unachievable, and then working on it and turning it into something real. And I think that is something you can do, and that is particularly going to be the case if you get another person's help. You might get some feedback. You might be told that you're wrong in some areas, but don't be afraid of other people's opinions. And going back to other, to relationships and other people, whatever the nature of those relationships. Some people are really very positive at the moment, and they do absolutely want the best for you, and they can take something that on the surface doesn't look very good, doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and they can just provide the crucial ideas to make it happen. And in that sense, Leo, it's very important that you don't feel that you're all on your own, that you have to battle things in your own way without getting any help or support. Absolutely not. And right now, Leo, you can really benefit from other people, and it's not just because the sun is moving through Aquarius, your opposite sign. It's a time when people are there for you, and they can help you, achieve your aims. I mean, I know that sounds dramatic, but it's possible. I mean, if those aims are reasonable, but they just need a bit of fine tuning, remove some of the fantasy, but stick to what is real, then other people are a resource. So do make the most of them. Virgo, the moon is now moving into Sagittarius, and with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you might feel that you do need to slow down. I mean, it's not that you have been moving very quickly, but however fast or however slowly you have been moving recently, you kind of want to go even slower, and you want to take time to maybe just understand what's happening, because you need that time, because you're not the sort of person in most cases that can make instant connections. You have to work it out. You have to allow yourself to adapt to the situation, and with the moon in Sagittarius, you can be intuitive, and you can in the end make the connections, but it just may take some time, and you absolutely don't want to overload yourself. I mean, if you overload yourself, it's not that you're going to be causing yourself a lot of damage. It's more that you might be losing opportunities. Just things are moving too quickly. If things are moving at 1,000 miles an hour, you don't have a chance to focus on any one thing and to really make sense of it. So, Virgo, do slow down. Do what you have to do, and don't take on anything which is just which just appears from nowhere. Someone might make a suggestion. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you go to this place? And your immediate reaction would be to say, okay, fine, I'll do this, I'll do that. But you'll be overloading yourself. What you need to do is decide where you're going to be and just stay there. You don't have to stay there in a completely rigid way. I'm not suggesting that you put yourself under house arrest or anything like that. But you have to feel a sense of groundedness. You have to be the center of the wheel. You don't want to be on the rim, moving super fast. Put yourself at the center of the wheel and start to work out what is happening, and try to understand it. Try to understand it all, and that way, you're going to then make really good progress. And from an organizational perspective, with a moon sextile sun, I think that Virgos are, really going to be able to sort themselves out. And, when you've got everything sorted out, when everything is in order, that means that you're in a better position to make things happen. You decide what's available, you think about what you want to do, you've got the information you need, and then you're in a position to take action. But I don't think you have to take action today. I mean, you can if you want. I mean, if you do something and you're well informed and you've made up your mind about it, and you've made sure you haven't been deceiving yourself, then I think you can be very effective. But I just don't think that there is any real hurry. And Mercury is still making that opposition to Mars. And, okay, that opposition to Mars was exact a couple of days ago, but it's still in place. And with Mercury opposition Mars, there are things that could make you angry, if particularly if you don't understand them. You might just respond too quickly to something that you haven't really thought through, and that's another reason why you have to take things slowly. Why you have to just look at the world as it evolves, and be the center of the wheel. And what you don't want to be is in a state of permanent reaction. You're always having to react to what's happening, and you say this, you say that, and you end up getting nowhere, or perhaps worse than nowhere. You just get yourself into trouble. You say things you don't mean, and it all turns into a big mess. But that is completely unnecessary. If you just take things slowly, you're slow, quiet, and deliberate, then I think, Virgo, it really should be a good day. Libra, you feel that there's just more energy. Librans can sometimes be too rational. They try to be logical about things, but then Libra, you reach a situation where you just feel a little bit unsatisfied. You can have as many ideas as you like, but where is the action? And with the moon in Sagittarius, the action is there. Finally, the moon is in a fast sign. We've got a planet in a fast sign, and Librans often need that spark. They just don't have the spark themselves, and they just need it from elsewhere. And that spark is provided by the moon moving into Sagittarius. And the moon doesn't just move into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to the sun. And that sun-moon sextile, Libra, it's pleasant. It can be fun. It's very constructive, and it makes you aware of the possibilities for realizing your potential, and also for enjoying yourself. And in terms of enjoying yourself, you'll be enjoying yourself when you do something that is really important to you, that is in accord with your own inner vision. And right now, Libra, you actually do have a vision. You have a vision about the way you'd like to be. You even might have a vision about the way the world should be. And it's quite a motivating vision. But vision on its own doesn't really mean much. It needs some action. It needs an outside spark. And yes, that outside spark is being provided by the moon in Sagittarius, and the fact that the moon is making a sextile to the sun. And the moon in Sagittarius might encourage you to experiment a bit. If you just stay in one place, that could be a problem. You're going to have to move a little. I mean, you might be in a situation, well, I don't really want to use a fishing analogy, because I'm not really, I don't eat fish, and on sort of moral grounds. I don't even like fish, actually, but if you wanted to use a fishing analogy, it would be like sort of staying in one place, fishing in one spot, and you're just fishing in the wrong spot, and just simply nothing's going to turn up, and you have to move around, and you have to perhaps recognize that, you know, some places are better than others, and movement over the course of the day is going to be useful. I mean, I suppose it doesn't have to be physical movement. It can be movement where, you know, you try different ideas, you get in touch with different people, and one way or another, you find the right spot. You find the place where you can be most successful and most happy. And, you know, once you've got that spot, you know, everything is fine. So experimentation could, I think, be very useful. Turning to relationships, Mars is still square Mercury. Sorry, Mars is still opposition Mercury. And now that Mars opposition Mercury is subsiding. It's losing its strength. But Mars and Mercury are still less than 2 degrees. The opposition is still less than 2 degrees apart. And, you know, this does mean that some of the people you have to interact with do say more than they have to, and they might say things which you don't really want to hear. And, you know, there's then the question of, you know, how you respond to it. And I think that you respond to it in a fairly relaxed way, and you don't take what people say too seriously. And it's not just what they say. Mars is making a sextile to Uranus. Now, yesterday that Mars sextile Uranus was exact, but that Mars sextile Uranus is still operational. And with that Mars sextile Uranus, don't be surprised if people do things that you just weren't expecting. You just hadn't considered it. You can't expect everyone to behave according to a particular plan. You know, people aren't robots. And however much you try to organize things, to, you know, to plan, to make plans, things can still happen. And other people might do something they've never done before with Mars sextile Uranus, even people you know very well. So don't be surprised and don't exaggerate. So what you could do is you might have an exaggerated response to another person's words or behavior. And you just may be making it more significant than it actually is. So, you know, with relationships, regardless of what those relationships are about, you do need to have an open mind, and you certainly shouldn't rise to the bait, you know, especially if someone says something that you don't agree with. You don't have to argue back. And in fact, with a moon sextile sun, you have a chance to really stabilize things. And whatever someone says, you can kind of deflect it, and you don't have to argue with them, you know, point by point. You can just make a general statement, make a general conciliatory statement, which doesn't really say anything but somehow diffuses the situation. And, you know, in that sense, Librans can be peacemakers, and that is part of what Libra is all about. Libra is a sign about peace and harmony, and, you know, wherever you go, you can create this harmony. So if you're involved in something which is angry, you know, you've got an angry situation, you might not be responsible for this angry situation. I think that in some respects your mere presence can help calm things down. Scorpio. There are some new challenges today. I don't think that these challenges are particularly dramatic, but it's certainly something to consider. And, you know, the issue might be connected with the moon moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. There has been a lot of water in the sky recently. A lot of planets in water signs. Mars is still in Cancer. Venus and Saturn are in Pisces. Neptune is also in Pisces. And you did have a moon moving through Scorpio. And that did make things, I think, quite easy for you. At least in terms of just generally understanding what was happening and being able to relate to a world that felt pretty familiar. But, with the moon moving into Sagittarius, moon moving into a fire sign, that might create a few challenges. Challenges that really are about perception. You got used to a particular environment, and now that environment has changed. There are things you have to respond to in a different way, and your response might not always be appropriate, or at least your first response might not always be appropriate. So you can't see everything in an emotional way, and sometimes you might want to keep quiet, not tell people about your opinion. You might think it's all obvious, there's nothing that has to be said, but sometimes things do have to be said. And with moon moving into Sagittarius, when you look at people's behavior, they might be sort of more active, not as subtle as they used to be, and that could be somewhat disturbing. But I don't think you should exaggerate. And very often, if people behave in a disturbing way, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes things just have to be stirred up, and you don't want things to just keep on going in the same old way. It does get a bit boring, it does get a bit stagnant, and having a situation where someone does something you absolutely weren't expecting, can be a good thing. It can help move things along, and your response is therefore going to be important, and making sure that you respond appropriately. Well, how do you respond appropriately? In most cases, it's important not to assume a conflict or a challenge, to feel that, if someone does something you weren't expecting, to feel that it's a personal affront. That's not how you should feel. I think instead, you should be more easygoing about it. Just accept that things aren't as significant as they look, and however strongly you feel about something, you shouldn't necessarily say anything. Unless you say things with a good heart. That's the important thing. If you are going to say something, do it in a way that is generous and is also open and honest. Don't try to hide things. If you can't help yourself, if you feel you want to be devious and you want to hide things, and you want to sort of conceal your true feelings, well, it's probably best to say nothing, because if you sort of speak in forked tongues, that's certainly not what you want to do. People will appreciate today openness and honesty. And one thing today which is important is really to concentrate on what you're good at, and not feel threatened. The sun is in Aquarius at the moment, and as the sun has obviously been in Aquarius, has been in Aquarius for 4 or 5 days, and the sun in Aquarius is a part of your chart that is very grounded, and the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and with that moon sextile sun, there should always just be that reminder that whatever happens, you're able to bring it down to earth and make sense of it. So, Scorpio, if you are faced with something you haven't come across before that is disturbing, is surprising, rather than just overreact, consider how you can make it part of your everyday experience, and that really is something you can do. And it just becomes part of your world, and it no longer has, there's no longer any sense of a challenge. At least that's how it can be. If we look at the heliocentric chart, there is some stuff going on that I probably should say something about. Heliocentrically, Mars is actually making an opposition to Pluto. Now, that Mars opposition Pluto, you might think that's something from the past, because geocentrically, Mars has had its opposition to Pluto. That's not going to happen again for a few months. But heliocentrically, it's a different picture. Mars is moving towards an opposition of Pluto, and that gives you, Scorpio, an awareness of a growing struggle, a struggle that you are possibly not directly involved with, but you can see it. You can see the fault lines around you. You can see how people can disagree with each other, and you can feel the tension. And you can feel that we're living in a divided world, and Scorpio is a very sensitive sign, and I know that the moon has just moved out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. That's true, and so you're able to perhaps, or should be a bit more relaxed about things and not take things so seriously. But still, that Mars opposition Pluto is increasing. Everyone can feel it, but I think you in particular can really feel it. It's just important to you, and it may be that there's a tendency sort of to divide things up, divide people up. You might think in terms of the in-group and the out-group, friends and enemies, Mars opposition Pluto, who's in control, who's not in control. So there could be a great sense of duality with Mars opposition Pluto. So when we talk about duality in astrology, one normally thinks about Gemini, for example. Gemini is a dual sign, double-bodied sign, the twins. There are other double-bodied signs. You have different ideas, and there's something a bit trivial about that, the duality of Gemini. The duality I'm talking about here, with the duality of a heliocentric Mars opposition Pluto aspect, is more the duality of good and evil, or thinking that there is a duality between good and evil. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Where is the struggle? And it's a struggle that someone is going to win and someone's going to lose, and it could feel as if it's going to be. It could feel as if it's desperately important, and I don't know how important it really is. There's always a possibility, Scorpio, that you're exaggerating. Or rather, you're making it too personal, when in actual fact, there is a struggle going on all around you. And it's an ongoing struggle, though this particular struggle, represented by Mars opposition Pluto, it may feel as if it's going to start to reach its dramatic phase in a few days' time. I mean, that is a possibility. And the question is, what do you do about it? I think that you decide whether it's worth getting involved, because this is a heliocentric aspect, and I think that when you're dealing with a heliocentric aspect, there is a voluntary nature to it. The heliocentric chart does represent collective forces, but because Mars is opposition Pluto, it seems that you are aware of these collective forces, and you're aware of this collective struggle, and what's happening on the collective level is kind of influencing you on the personal. So the question is, to what extent do you want to personalize the collective? And you could take things too far, and you might think that what happens out there in the world has an immediate impact on you as an individual, and it doesn't. Whoever wins, whoever loses, even if evil triumphs, that's not necessarily going to affect your life in the short term. But it would be helpful, Scorpio, if if you do feel disturbed over the next couple of days, if it will be helpful if you just understood why, and not make it so personal. Sagittarius, I have been accused, maybe, if that's the right word, or it has been suggested that over the last few days I have been somewhat negative about Sagittarius. There are reasons in general why I have sometimes been a little bit negative about this, about your sign. One reason is the state of Jupiter. As I recently explained, Jupiter is in quite a difficult position. Jupiter is in Sagittarius, which is, Jupiter is in Gemini, which is in a sign of its detriment. It is going retrograde, and until very recently it had no dignity. It was peregrine. Now it has term. It's in its Egyptian term, so it's not as bad as it used to be. So there were grounds for being a little bit negative about Sagittarius. But, as I've said, the situation is improving. On March the 4th, Jupiter goes direct, and of course in June, Jupiter goes into Cancer. But as far as today is concerned, the moon is moving out of Scorpio and is moving into Sagittarius. And so moon moving into Sagittarius, if you're a Sagittarian, you can regard that as good news. And there's certainly no reason to be negative, certainly about today. And the moon is in a fast sign. And that was another reason why I might have sometimes been a little bit downbeat about Sagittarians, because there hasn't been much fire around. And so Sagittarians need that fire. It's important to them. It's their spark. And with no fire, with Jupiter in a somewhat difficult position, I was a little bit negative. But anyway, the moon is moving into Sagittarius. It's not just moving into Sagittarius, it's making a sextile to the sun. And moon sextile sun is, one of the best aspects in the book. It's healthy. It reminds us of one's fundamental vitality. And it's a time, Sagittarius, when you're really going to be able to express yourself. And express yourself powerfully, because the moon doesn't just make a sextile to the sun; it makes a sextile to Pluto. So the moon is picking up that. It's picking up on the Sun Pluto conjunction, which is still in force. Sun and Pluto are only 3 degrees apart. So you're able to change things. So if you're not happy about the way things are, and you might not be, nothing is going to be entirely perfect, even if things are getting better. If you're not happy with the way things are, you can indeed make things happen through the power of your will. And this doesn't mean that you have to be involved in any kind of struggle, but you have to argue with people. I think you'll just have a natural talent and a way with words, and also just a presence, which is going to be enough in most cases to just get your way, without much of a struggle. But even if there is a struggle, it's a struggle that I just think in most cases, you're going to win out, and you can certainly be successful. But don't let the past hold you back. If things haven't worked out recently, you might then think, well, this is just part of a general trend and there's nothing you can do about it. If things were difficult yesterday, they might be difficult today. Well, don't fall into that kind of negative thinking, and don't spend too much time listening to other people. Spend a bit of time listening to other people, by all means. I think that is important. You need to understand who you're dealing with. But you don't want to be in a situation where another person's decisions or opinions stop you in your tracks. That would be unnecessary. If you feel that you're having to deal with someone who is stubborn, obstinate, who is telling you what you can't do, then it's not a permanent situation. You can change people's minds. Even if you can't change people's minds, I think it is a time when you can get the better of them. Get the better of them, not through a fight, not through an argument, but just through an act of will, which would be about, the moon, sextile Pluto, sextile Sun, and indeed through the power of your will, you can resolve conflicts. Even if you're not involved in the conflict, you can still resolve it. So, Sagittarius, I'm sorry if recently I have been a bit negative, but I think today is going to be a great day. And in terms of star ratings, I'd give it 5 stars out of 5. How's that? Capricorn, you are in a sort of strange state at the moment. It's a somewhat contradictory state. On one hand, you are aware that things are starting to slow down a bit, that you don't want to be in lots of different places. You don't want to be overcommitting yourself, and you feel that prevailing energies are not entirely in keeping with your own plans and ideas, and so you might then feel that it is a time to pause. So that's one side of things, and that might sound a little bit negative, but on the other hand, Capricorn, you seem to feel that everything is great, and that even if things are very slow, if they're delayed, you actually feel that things are actually going to be fine. And even in terms of what you say, you're sort of contradicting yourself. It seems that what you say and what you think may actually be different. So you may sound rather negative, and if someone asks your opinion, you might take the view that things aren't great. At least that's what you'll say. But privately, in your heart, you are really optimistic. You know that it's all going to happen. You know everything's fine, and you have an inner confidence. But it's not a confidence you're expressing. It may be, but you don't want to jinx things. If you are too confident in terms of what you say, you may in some ways feel that you're preventing something from happening. And that is a healthy attitude, unless you're dealing with people who need a boost. And some people do need a boost. They feel that things aren't working well, and they don't want to be just told what they already believe. They want to be given hope. And Capricorn, you are someone who is able to give hope. I mean, you start off by giving hope to yourself, and that doesn't seem to be a problem, because you do have this inner confidence and an inner belief that however complicated things are actually in the end going to work out. But sometimes you have to share that hope with others, because that really is what they need, and in that way you can make everyone feel happy. But you don't want to make people, I suppose, feel too happy, because there's a danger that people are just optimistic for the sake of it, and you don't want people being over optimistic. I mean, that's never a good thing. As far as money is concerned, there is a sextile between the moon and Pluto, and the moon and the sun. And Pluto is connected with money. I mean, you think about the word Pluto and forms of government, a plutocracy. A plutocracy is government of the rich. And that's sometimes forgotten, this connection between Pluto and money. I think that traditionally there was a connection between Pluto and buried treasure. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, Pluto is the underworld, and the gold is under the ground. And with the moon making a sextile to Pluto, with the moon making a sextile to the Pluto and a sextile to the sun, that would indicate, Capricorn, that there could be some kind of financial opportunity, not necessarily buried treasure, but maybe a realistic equivalent of buried treasure, using your abilities and maybe a little bit of intuition to find something which could be profitable, which might have a value to it, and you then need to be in a position where you are actually doing something which could have a financial result. That might not be of any interest to you. Money might not be important, but if money is important to you, if there are financial concerns, or you feel you'd like some more money, then the moon sextile Pluto, moon sextile Sun just could give you an opportunity to get in touch with something that has real value. And so that's something going on today, which is, that moon sextile Sun isn't just about money. It can actually be about relationships, how you relate to other people. And on balance, I would have said that relationships should work fairly well, provided that they are done in the right way. Relationships are not anything that should happen in public. Moon in Sagittarius, sextile the Sun, it should be quite an understated influence. Getting to know people quietly, rather than in the bright lights. And so certain relationships can develop, but in a slow and subtle way that might not be immediately obvious. And I suppose this is a reminder that the good things in life don't develop in the sunlight. They often develop in the darkness, and that takes us back to the moon sextile Pluto. And the Pluto does represent things that are underground, that to an extent are hidden. Aquarius, you are at the moment in a fairly sort of friendly state of mind. You like people. You want to be with people on your terms, as always, but that shouldn't be a problem. We've got a sextile aspect between the moon and Pluto, and the moon and the sun. And that moon sextile Sun is really very sociable. The Sun, you could say, is representative of other people. Sun rules Leo. Leo is your opposite sign. You've got the moon in Sagittarius, a very sociable sign. So moon sextile Sun means that you should, take every opportunity to, meet new people, and also to consider how people might have an impact on your future. And because it is a time to be thinking about the future, and to be thinking about what you'd like to be doing in a year's time, or perhaps longer. And so pay some attention to that. And the future might sometimes seem a little bit overwhelming, something you don't really want to get involved with, because when you think about the future, it often gives you an idea of a passing of time. And I suppose getting older, that's one way of looking at the future, because if you're talking about a future event, then you're going to be a little bit older at the time of that event, maybe a few days older, maybe a few years older. It depends on the time scale. But do address yourself to the future, and be optimistic about the future. Be very optimistic about the future without necessarily deluding yourself. There's no need to delude yourself, because actually there is quite a lot to be optimistic about. And in terms of that optimism, the less ego there is, the better when you consider the future. With this moon sextile sun, it's perhaps not just about your future, it's about other people's future, it's about the world's future. And what you can do is try to align yourself to this future. And the future, okay, it might be purely hedonistic, just thinking about your own needs. I suppose it could be like that, but it shouldn't be like that. It could be about something that is broader, and it does have a strong sense of idealism to it. And it's okay to have hopes, to hope for something to happen. And a hope on its own is, of course, meaningless, but you do have the resources to make those hopes actually happen. As far as relationships are concerned, this sextile between the moon and the sun, I would have said, is entirely favourable. It allows you to relate. You know how much you're prepared to give away. You're not going to give away too much. And at the same time, Aquarians can sometimes be a little too analytical. They can focus on ideas and facts, and it can just get a bit dry. And sometimes you need something extra, and that extra can be provided by other people. Other people provide you with the spark, and also people who may recently have been a little bit boring, and underwhelming, may show a new side to their personality, and you might be pleasantly surprised. You may have thought someone was of no use to you, unexciting, tedious, going nowhere, and then you just see something else, and you realize that you're dealing with exciting people, inspiring people who can give you new ideas, and yes, they can help you align to the future. So, looking at the day in general, it can be good. I mean, it could be a day that just passes. You kind of enjoy yourself. It seems okay, but it doesn't feel very significant. I mean, if you don't want to really take advantage of everything that's happening today, but if you want it to be a significant day, and if you want it to be a day where you can think about who you are and what you hope for, and if you want to be supported by your environment, then I think it can be a day that is really pretty good. And so there is a bit of choice there, Aquarius, but really do try to make the most of things. Pisces. In a way, it's a time where you have to get real. You've had thoughts, you've had ideas, possibilities have come your way, and now you have to put things into action. That's what you want to do. You're quite happy to put things into action. In the past, you maybe didn't feel you had the opportunity, and now seems to be the time to do it. Okay, I know it's a Friday, it's the end of a week, but just because it's a Friday doesn't mean that things have to slow down. I mean, even if it's a Saturday, I mean, it doesn't matter. Every day is important, and every day has the possibility of a new start. And with the moon in Sagittarius making a sextile to the sun, you have a chance to really get going, and you don't have to advertise it. You might think that when you have a new start, when you've decided to commit yourself to something, that other people have to know, but that's not the case. You make your own decision. You almost have your symbolic moment where something kicks off, and this moon sextile the sun, which in some respects is the main aspect of the day. Okay, this this aspect between the moon and sextile sun may be more about tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but whether it's today or tomorrow, it's quite motivating, but it's quiet at the same time. So in fact, there's no need for a fanfare, and so you can just get going on it. And part of what's happening, Pisces, is that you're taking things that you've learnt so far this year, 2025, and you're bringing them together, and you are making connections. You're making actually intuitive connections. You are creating something out of the chaos of 2025 so far, but the strands are coming together, and you're starting to just know what you have to do, and you also know that in a week's time there'll be a new moon, and you want to be ready for the new moon. So it's a new beginning so that you can be ready for the new beginning. So it's a kind of a new beginning of something else. So preparing yourself, given what you know, and then in a week's time, you really will be in the swing of things. So do take advantage of this moon sextile the sun, and also this moon is sextile Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius, and of course it's been in Aquarius since November the 17th, and it's going to stay in Aquarius for almost the next couple of decades, not quite 20 years. And Pluto in Aquarius represents you as the silent transformer. You're the one who can create change, but it's a change that doesn't have to be spoken. It can be hidden. Many things are most powerful when they are hidden. And that goes back to what I was talking about with this moon sextile sun. It's not a change that has to be advertised. In fact, the less you advertise it, the better, the more powerful it will be. And so that is something that you really should be working on. And it is a challenge. The moon in Sagittarius does make an opposition to Jupiter. Usually most of us, that moon opposition Jupiter will be tomorrow. In the Americas might be very late in the day, but that moon opposition Jupiter is coming, and that is a challenge. And you've got used to something. You've got used to being in a particular state of mind, perhaps even in a physical place. That's Jupiter in Gemini, retrograde. But moon opposition Jupiter is a challenge to move forward and to do something that you're not necessarily entirely comfortable with, at least at first. Once you really get into the swing of things, you'll be able to bring to bear enormous power. So that power comes from within. Again, it doesn't have to be advertised. In fact, I really should emphasize that the less advertised it is, the better. If people can't see your power, then that's great, because they don't know how to react to it. They can't respond to it. So when your power is unknown and is hidden, there's nothing to prevent it from actually bearing fruit. And so you get really a considerable amount of freedom. And of all the 12 signs, it may be that Pisces is the one who is most likely to be underestimated. And it's great to be underestimated, because when you're underestimated, you've got there's no resistance. And so what is it, Pisces, that you'd like to achieve? Because I think you really can do it. And you might be challenged, you might feel that you're not up to it, but there's no need to have those kind of doubts, because if there's something you really want, and it's reasonable and it's ethical, then Pisces, there's absolutely no reason why you can't actually achieve it. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to consider things from the perspective of the I Ching. I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And this hexagram doesn't move. There are no moving lines. And the corners of the mouth does represent what we say. It can also be about what we eat, and it can be about nurturing, but it doesn't move anywhere. And so you could say, because it's not moving anywhere, well, it's not going to be a particularly eventful day. But we might also see it as having to concentrate on something we are involved with and not moving beyond the situation. One way of looking at the corners of the mouth is to say, well, you might think of, say, a hamster that has just eaten a lot. Its cheeks are bulging. And you can see the mouth here. The top and the bottom lines of the lips, and then you've got the side of the mouth. So the hamster with the bulging cheeks gives us the idea of having taken on a lot. Not necessarily too much, but when our mouth is full, there's no way we can consume any more. We have to stop what we're doing and finish eating. And that may be why there are no moving lines. We have to finish what we're doing. It's not a time to be taking on anything new, because we just haven't got the resources, and we've literally got enough on our plate. And that might be the key image. We've got enough on our plate, and we certainly don't want any more. So that is one way of looking at the corners of the mouth. It's also about what we say. There is just the focus on what we say. The words we say today are going to be important, and our words could cause a lot of damage. Mercury is still making an opposition to Mars. That opposition aspect is starting to fade, but still there. And so with corners of the mouth, our words really do matter. And going back to the food analogy, quite literally, what we eat matters, and we maybe need to be careful what we eat. Don't just eat any old junk. Eat something that is good for you. Healthy eating, thinking about healthy eating with the corners of the mouth is certainly something useful, something we should be doing. Now, the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching has another view of the corners of the mouth, which is a view I really like, and it says that we shouldn't be focusing just on our own mouths. We should be focusing on other people's mouths, and in particular what other people are eating and what nurtures other people, and the idea that you can actually understand someone by looking at what they eat, what makes them feel happy. Some people are into power, some people are into food, some people are into money. Whatever nurtures someone, that tells you what kind of person they are, and that might give you an idea about whether someone can be trusted. So if you're working out whether someone can be trusted and you're talking to them and they're talking about money all the time, and money seems to really concern them, well, now you know what motivates them. That might be fine. And that might be, if it's a financial issue, then fair enough. But if it's not, that might be a cause for concern. Or someone who is always asking what things cost, pointing out, oh, this is expensive, money, this is cheap, that obsession with the price of things, that just does say something about a person's priorities. So observe other people's behavior and observe what nourishes people, because that might give you an opportunity to understand whether or not they can be trusted. And if we remember the heliocentric picture, heliocentrically, there was a square aspect between Venus and Neptune. And I suggested that this Venus square Neptune, that we did have to be a little bit careful about deception. You know, not everyone can be trusted. We can't necessarily take people's words at face value. But if we really want to get an indication about whether someone can be trusted, we can just look at what nurtures them. And this hexagram, if we knock out the top and the bottom lines to get the nuclear hexagram is 6 unbroken lines. Sorry, 6 broken lines. So take the top line, take the top line off, take the bottom line off, and you create the nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram is the receptive. And this gives us an idea about the underlying picture. And receptive is about doing nothing. And it's, or observing, and this is perhaps a reminder of what the corners of the mouth is fundamentally about. It's not about taking on anything new, and it's about perhaps observing other people's behavior. In terms of our own actions, we're not looking for new tasks because our plate is full, and so there should be nothing new coming in today. Not really. Because everything is there in front of you, and new things are just surplus to requirement. You're just going to get indigestion, basically. Continuing on the food analogy, so avoid indigestion. Don't take anything new. Complete what's in front of you. Make sure your cheeks are no longer bulging with all this stuff you're trying to consume. Because if you stuff more things in, then it's just going to get intolerable, and you're going to feel awful, and you're going to have really serious indigestion. And so that's the corners of the mouth. And I now want to turn back to the astrology, and I wanted to start with this tragedy in Germany. I'm not going to spend a long time on this chart before I look at Obama. And so this tragedy, I haven't really looked in great detail at it. So what happened was, I believe it was a park in Germany, in Bavaria, where there was in this town of Aschaffenburg. So Aschaffenburg is in northwest Bavaria. I mean, it's actually pretty close to Frankfurt, and there were some preschool children, I think, in a park. These toddlers, very small children, and they were attacked by an Afghan man with a knife, and the police have said he's mentally ill. I mean, who knows what the real story is? One of these, last time I looked at the story, one of these children was killed, and there was a passerby who tried to intervene who was also killed. And it's just more stuff going on, more stabbings, and it's just something going on in Europe. It's not just Germany. We had the Southport stabbings in the UK, and it's creating, obviously, a fairly intolerable atmosphere. And of course, in Germany, we've got elections coming up on February the 23rd. Actually, I think that the boy who was killed was of Moroccan descent. So I mean that. I think that's what the BBC said. So in terms of the chart, and I'm sorry to look at this kind of event, but I think that one wants to see what's going on astrologically, and so 11:45 a.m. and I mean, I don't know whether 11:45 was the exact time, because it is quite a precise time, isn't it? And Mercury was exactly on the midheaven. Now, you don't normally associate Mercury with stabbings, with bad things like this. You see Mercury as more about communications and talking and so on, or ideas. But you have to look at the overall picture of Mercury. Mercury is opposition Mars. And again, it's not an exact opposition to Mars, but Mercury is moving towards the opposition of Mars, and it's on the angles. So Mars on the IC is a significator of an attack, and so Mercury, in a way, could be a trigger. That Mercury on the midheaven is that's the final moment. And in assuming it really was at 11:45, Mercury was exactly there, exactly on that midheaven. And the ascendant is interesting, because the ascendant, you see Moon in Scorpio and you see Uranus in Taurus. Neither Uranus or the Moon are exactly on the ascendant or the ascendant and the descendant. They're quite a way off. They're both, Moon is 6 degrees off for descendant. Uranus is 8 degrees off. So that is not exact, but there is a certain symmetry there. You can see the symmetry that potentially the ascendant and the Moon, the ascendant is potentially on the Moon Uranus midpoint, because if you take 23 and you take 9 and you find the midpoint between 9 and 23. So you could add 9 and 23. So 9 and 23 is 32, and then you divide 32 by 2, and that gives you 16. So the midpoint would be around 16, and so there's your 16. There's your 15, 16 Taurus. So the ascendant is on the Moon Uranus midpoint. So Moon Uranus midpoint. Moon Uranus would be, I suppose the Moon would be about children. Uranus, perhaps an attack on children. And if we actually look at the dial, this is a 90-degree dial of the attack. And if we put the ascendant on the, see, if I make the ascendant, if we look at the symmetry of the ascendant, again, assuming 11:45 is the time of the attack, and I don't think it necessarily was as exact as this, but there you can see the ascendant is on the Moon Uranus midpoint, and so we can see that. Another midpoint that we have is that there's the planet Hades. And there was a fairly close Venus-Saturn conjunction. And that Venus-Saturn conjunction, when you look at the symmetry on this chart, is lined up with Hades. And so Hades is a planet of death and the underworld. And so the ascendant on the Saturn-Hades midpoint and on the Venus-Hades midpoint, that is pretty grim, I would have said. And of course Mercury was exactly on the midheaven. I don't know if there are any midpoints involving Mercury. So what we can do about Mercury opposition, we can see if there are any midpoints involving the MC and Mercury. I don't see anything especially spectacular. So that's one way of looking at this attack. And another way of looking at the attack is to look at the prenatal full moon. And so this would be the full moon taking place before the attack. And so again, I just set this chart, January the 13th, 2025 for Aschaffenburg, because that for the exact time of the full moon. And there you can see that full moon was at 24 Aquarius. And what is significant about this chart is, well, firstly, that we know that it was quite a violent full moon. If you remember, that full moon was conjunct Mars, and you had the full moon conjunct Mars. So that was telling you something about the general experience of it. But what does that say about Aschaffenburg? That doesn't tell us that there was going to be an attack in Aschaffenburg. Why Aschaffenburg? Well, at the time of that full moon set for Aschaffenburg, the Mercury was at 8 degrees Capricorn. So Mercury was exactly on the IC, exactly on the IC. And so that might make this chart more specific to the location. And that means that the full moon had Mercury exactly on the midheaven, Mercury exactly on the IC, and that suggested perhaps the attack, because at the time of the attack, Mercury was exactly on the midheaven. So the full moon before the attack, Mercury was exactly on the IC, and at the time of the attack, Mercury was exactly on the midheaven. So I just thought I had to share that observation. And I now want to consider Barack Obama. So Barack Obama has been in the news recently. And here is Barack Obama's horoscope. And, with Barack Obama, there was all this stuff about where he was born. And I don't know why people got so obsessed about it. I mean, of course, he was born in Honolulu, but even if he was born somewhere else, would it have made any difference? Because, I mean, my understanding of the American Constitution is that if your mother is American, then you are you are straight away. If your mother is American at the time of your birth, you are an American citizen. So you are born an American citizen. So that means that you automatically are able to stand to be president. So even if he was born in Jakarta or Nairobi or Mombasa or wherever, his mother was American, so he'd always be entitled to American citizenship. Entitled to stand to be the US president. Maybe I've got that wrong, but I never quite understood why there was this obsession about, where he was born. But I'm going for his Honolulu time, which I'm sure that was where he was born. I hope I don't lose any subscribers for saying that. And the question is, what is actually happening in Barack Obama's chart? And, I'm just not convinced that Barack Obama is going away. And there's something about Barack Obama that does attract him to the US presidency. So if there was his appearance at the inauguration, of course we saw him at Jimmy Carter's funeral, but in his inauguration you saw the presidential couples being announced. Even Bill and Hillary came in together, and Bush and what's her name, Laura, George Bush Jr. and Laura came in, but then Barack Obama came in on his own because his wife had some supposed previous engagement, which is kind of strange because the American electoral calendar is so fixed that the moment Barack Obama had been elected, was elected president in 2008, he would have known that he had an engagement on January the 20th, 2020, on January the 20th, 2024. I mean, he would have known, January 20th, 2025. So he would have known that him and Michelle would have known they would have had to have been at this thing. But so they had previous engagements. That's ridiculous because they actually had 18, what's that? They had 17 years warning. Is that right? More than that. Yeah, they had 17 years warning. So it's not really an engagement they needed to miss because there was that Michelle needed to miss. So anyway, it was noted that Michelle Obama was missing. So what was going on for Obama at this time? So let's look at Barack Obama's chart and the chart of the inauguration of 2025. So the inaugurations always happen when the sun is at the beginning of Aquarius, at 0 degrees Aquarius, always, at least since the 1930s. And so sun was at around 1 Aquarius. So Barack Obama has his Jupiter at 1 Aquarius. And so that Jupiter, you could argue with Barack Obama, made it much easier for him to be elected president, because always on the day of inauguration he would have Sun conjunct Jupiter. So he got inaugurated on 2009 for his first term, so naturally he's going to get inaugurated for a second term. It's a day that he's naturally attracted to, because it is the time when Sun is conjunct his Jupiter. But this inauguration, it wasn't just the Sun that was conjunct his Jupiter, but it was Pluto conjunct his Jupiter as well. So it's a powerful time for Barack Obama, and I think that Sun conjunct Pluto really hit his Jupiter. And when you see Jupiter conjunct Jupiter hitting Pluto, Pluto hitting Jupiter, one principle of that is self-improvement, wanting to do better for yourself. And so here is a man who is, he's 63 years old, which is not that old, and he has still got a lot of life left in him. He's got he's certainly got strong beliefs, and I'm sure that he's thinking about how can he have an impact on the United States political system. So those on the right who were saying that this was the end of the Obama era, that Obama is someone from the past, don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry to dismiss Obama. And with Pluto conjunct Jupiter, that's certainly a time when he is very, very motivated. And if you look at his solar arc directions, so if his solar arc directions, if we move all his planets, 63 degrees, and we move the midheaven 63 degrees as well. So here is Barack Obama's solar arc direction for Inauguration Day. And his solar arc directed midheaven is at 0 degrees 31 Aquarius. So what that means is that his solar arc directed midheaven is moving towards a conjunction of his Jupiter. And on that Inauguration Day, he had the Sun conjunct his Jupiter and Pluto conjunct his Jupiter. That solar arc directed midheaven on his Jupiter does not indicate to me a man who is giving up politics. It really, really, really doesn't. And so I think that we really shouldn't, absolutely shouldn't write him off. Interestingly, Pluto, look at Pluto. Pluto, his solar arc directed Pluto was at 8 degrees 36 Scorpio. His Neptune is at 8 degrees 36 Scorpio. So he had Pluto exactly conjunct his natal Neptune. Now this is a generational aspect. Anyone born around the time of Obama will be having approximately having Pluto conjunct their Neptune at that kind of age, because if you think about it, Neptune and Pluto have been in sextile for a long time. In fact, Neptune and Pluto, where's Neptune? Neptune is still in sextile. So Neptune and Pluto have been in sextile for decades. And so that means that the age of 60 is an important age, because that is when Pluto, by solar arc direction, catches up with Neptune. Now, for most of us, it's not important. It's not a big deal, because we're not politicians. We're not involved with the collective. But if you are Obama, someone who is so tapped into the collective, someone who has been president for 8 years, I would have said that Pluto conjunct Neptune really is an important aspect. And Neptune is about perhaps his ideals, what he hopes for, what he believes is possible, how he wants to transcend. And then he gets that Pluto exactly on his Neptune when he has to sit there and watch Trump being made president, having put so much effort into stopping Trump. And it seems in many respects his efforts to stop Trump backfired. And so with that Pluto conjunct his Neptune, that must privately have been devastating for him, not just as an individual, but on a collective level. And he's just part of that collective. And really devastating. Pluto appearing to destroy his dreams or transform his dreams. But I don't think his dreams have gone away. And that midheaven, solar arc directed midheaven on his Jupiter, he's busy. He's working away. He certainly hasn't given up on things, I don't think. And then there is the question of him and Michelle Obama. There's been all sorts of speculation about their marriage. And I think a couple of weeks ago, I did mention that Obama and Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, there was a shared connection that was hit by Sun and Mars. I didn't really draw it together, but let me just show you what I mean. So there was a Sun-Mars, where's it gone? There was a Sun-Mars opposition on January the 16th. And here was the Sun opposition Mars. So Sun was at 2613, it's Capricorn, and Mars was at 2613 Cancer. And we can therefore look at how, remember 26 Capricorn Cancer. So if we compare the two charts, so I put Michelle Obama in the middle. Again, I don't have a time of birth for Michelle Obama. I do have obviously we do have a time of birth for Barack Obama, and one piece of synastry they have is there is Michelle Obama's Sun and there is Barack Obama's Saturn. So his Saturn is conjunct her Sun, and so her Sun is something projectable. The Sun represents the kind of man she wants to marry, and his Saturn in Capricorn at some level seemed to represent that kind of man. But at the same time, Saturn can be quite a restrictive influence. And so this Sun-Mars opposition, which we had on the 16th, when you had the Sun at 26 Capricorn opposition with Mars at 26 Cancer, was hitting a really crucial piece of synastry in their chart. And it does seem that the moment that Sun-Mars opposition happened, that's when a lot of the questions started to happen about the marriage. Of course, we had the fact that she didn't turn up to Jimmy Carter's funeral, but so something was going on. But I would have said that that's when you started to have issues. I mean, looking at a few other things in their chart. There's Michelle Obama's Mars at 331 Aquarius, and Barack Obama has a Mercury Black Moon Lilith, true Black Moon Lilith conjunction at 2-3 Leo, which is opposition her Mars. So you can imagine her Mars opposition his Mercury. That's really causing a lot of friction potentially. There is a lot of trouble and strife, as they say, isn't it? With that Mercury opposition Mars in their chart. So that's certainly an interesting piece of synastry. And then I don't know about quincunxes. So there's her Saturn at 2213 Aquarius, and Mars is at 22 Virgo. So his Mars is quincunx her Saturn. So there's something a little bit frustrating about it. And by the way, but see, Barack Obama also has a Mercury opposition Jupiter. So he's got his Mercury opposition Jupiter, and Pluto is hitting his Mercury opposition Jupiter. It's really blowing it up. And that Mercury opposition Jupiter is right on Michelle Obama's Mars. And so that's her getting annoyed, although it might also say something about the kind of man she's attracted to. The fact that she has a Sun in Capricorn, but also the Mars in Aquarius. And I would have said that Mars in Aquarius would be quite descriptive of Barack Obama. in a general sense. And Barack Obama, of course, has his ascendant is 18 Aquarius, so that is actually an important piece of synastry. Barack Obama has Aquarius rising, 18 Aquarius, and so with Michelle Obama's Saturn in Aquarius on his ascendant, he might find her a little bit too overwhelming. She's just trying to control him. She's perhaps cramping his style a bit, and so maybe that might be one of the reasons why their marriage is under a lot of pressure. I could speculate more, but I don't think I will, and I will leave it at that. So thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.